There's lots of opinions about how companies should move from founder-led sales to sales-led sales. Everyone really has the same goal, which is to get to the point where they can scale revenue and go to market and become one of those rocket ships that everyone's hoping for. But the actual steps they take to get there can vary, and the recommendations can vary depending who you talk to. In this conversation, I'm talking with someone who recommends doing it in a way that probably doesn't fit neatly into one of the conventional paths that people talk about. You're going to hear from someone who's been a sales leader in cyber for many years. Recently, she was the CRO at Hidden Layer, and now she is a go-to-market advisor at YL Ventures. So she's got the experience and the credibility to back up her approach. And she's actually advising founders right now about the things that she's going to talk about in this episode. So I'm delighted today to be welcoming Abigail Maines to the podcast. I'm Andrew Monahan, and this is a cybersecurity go-to-market podcast where we tackle the question, how can cybersecurity companies grow sales faster? Well, Abigail, welcome to the podcast. It's going to be an interesting discussion for us all today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
You have got a storied history, let's say, in cybersecurity. It goes back quite a bit, right? You've been at different companies. Latterly, you were the CRO at Hidden Layer, which is the AI security company, which won the Innovation Sandbox Comp at RSA, 23, I think it was. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, Tito got on stage and presented in front of thousands and came through and won that. That was awesome.
Yeah.
What a great moment as a startup, right? Being able to do that.
Yeah.
You're also the co-founder of Fierce, which we're going to come back to in a little bit. And currently you're a go-to-market advisor at YL Ventures as well. So you're in a really unique part of the industry for this conversation.
Very fortunate, yes.
Well, let's go back to Hidden Layer. So, my recollection was that Hidden Layer came out the blocks fast, right? It got the attention. It was capturing the buzz, I guess, the wave around AI in that time frame. But you went into Hidden Layer super early as a CRO, and people don't do that. So let's go back to that moment when you were there. Why did you go there? What was the attraction, and why go in as a CRO at a company so early?
Yeah, that's a great question. I went in early with some colleagues that I had known at Cylance, and I have a lot of esteem for them and respect for their technical acumen. And so I was actually an advisor first before we raised the seed round of funding, which was in the spring of 23 or 22, actually, and I joined formally in September. I think I liked the opportunity of building something from the ground. I had never started as employee 13, although I shouldn't say that. I did one time early in my career back when I was in Buffalo, start very early, but I like the idea of building a go-to-market motion from scratch. And that's exactly what I was able to do. The three founders afforded me a lot of autonomy to do that. Because really when I joined, it was a couple of engineers, a research team, and me. So it was kind of an interesting era. And I really understood, because we all had come from Cylance, I did understand predictive AI and what predictive AI was vulnerable to. Because we had, and unfortunately had a breach at Cylance on our predictive model, which was how we came up with the idea for Hidden Layer. So I think I like the technology, I like the space, but I really like the idea of being able to build it myself. Because to be honest with you, having spent time at Cylance, Checkpoint, Cyber Reason, even Absolute Software, which was more on the physical security side, I would say there was, in my opinion, lots of opportunities to enhance or innovate and go to market that I hadn't yet seen in practice that I wanted to try out there. And I was definitely given that opportunity.
And you went in there as a let's call it a proper CRO, right? Sometimes titles are elevated, let's say, when people go in for whatever reason. You weren't, the common thinking right now is around, the move from founder-led sales to sales-led sales, hire some people more junior, maybe hire 2 or 3 people, get some coverage, work with them very closely, and then maybe in a year or two, you bring in someone who's the true CRO. That's not what happened. So what was your experience of that? And how did that shape your thinking about how best to do this, move from founder-led sales into sales-led sales?
I see that I see the description that you're giving with founder-led sales to some junior salespeople quite often. I did prior to Hidden Layer, and I still see it now. I think in particular, when you're talking to very strong technical founders, there's a little bit of a misconception about what sales really is early days. I think there's this concept of we need to do a lot of demand gen and cold calling and demos and then closing. And really, in my opinion, early stage sales are much more characterized by crafting a message that resonates with more folks. It's much more about defining the ICP because you don't really know that, particularly in a new category like hidden layer was. And you really don't fully understand what is going to land in terms of the customer feature set that ultimately gets you to their product market fit. And I don't think junior salespeople can accomplish the sort of the laundry list of the latter items. And I think to put that on the founder early days when they have other competing priorities, whether it's building the team, dealing with investors, and just technical moat building, I think that results in a gap in between sort of the cold calling and the demos and then the founder that I was able to fill at Hidden Layer early days because I had an appreciation for the level of sophistication one needs to be in order to sort of get from 0 to 10 million. I also think one of the major lessons of Hidden Layer that I definitely talk a lot about with the YL workflows that are early sort of stealth through A is early day revenue is not really a volume game at all. It is much more a precision game. So this concept of having a huge top of funnel motion or a huge number of leads because you went to an event and then you're going to whittle that down into something compelling, I don't agree with. I think that it's much more important to be able to find yourself talking to customers who have the problem that you solve, or at least appreciate the problem that you have to solve, potentially have a project, maybe have a budget, maybe not, but at least are aware of the problem that you're solving. That requires, from a founding CRO perspective, a lot of marketing acumen. It requires analyst relations that are really crisp. It requires SEO that is really targeted. Because ultimately, that's where our early leads at Hidden Layer came from that were compelling. Like, it was very precise. And we had to make sure that customers that had the problem were finding us first. And that really helped with our speed, with our momentum, because we were not chasing big numbers. We didn't have MQLs moving to SQLs. We had customer has interest and customer has intent, and that basically meant we wanted customers with intent, right? We were really focused on the precise ICP that cared about our problem. So that's what I learned. And I think when you don't have a business person thinking about that, what you will find is a lot of friction in the organization, because you're going to find lots of different voices coming from the field through those junior sellers. Not that it's their fault. It's not something personal about junior sellers. Just they don't have maybe the cross-functional expertise to understand that just because that customer took the phone call doesn't mean we want to redo our entire product roadmap to meet that customer's maybe.
You said something there, Abigail, which was counterintuitive to me, which was it helped with our speed. Now, if I was a founder, I might be thinking speed is hire 3 or 4 people. Let's put the foot down. Let's go acquire a whole bunch of customers. I want to get real revenue and real money in the door, not investing money all the time, right? And yet you're saying, well, actually doing it your way, doing it with the really super savvy, experienced leader actually helped with speed. So, dissect that one for me.
I can definitely sell faster than 3 or 4 or 5 junior salespeople for sure. Yes, when you get a lot of friction with more people, period, early days. So we're talking early days, right? And so when I say slow, what I mean as somebody like myself spending a lot of time talking to 4 or 5 salespeople, or a founder talking to 4 or 5 salespeople who are not equipped to make sort of the complicated trade-off business decisions about what's relevant or what's not relevant to the company and to the customer. What person within a customer has credibility to even bring that feedback back into the organization. They just are not equipped to have the expertise really to be able to lead through that. So what happens is you bring that information back into the founder in the absence of sort of a founding CRO, and the founder has to do that. So now the founder's not talking to customers, not talking to investors, not talking to employees. They're talking to a sales rep to try to figure out what the opportunity really is. And that to me is the slow. And if you magnify that by 3 to 5 people, that's 2 or 3 jobs for the founder to do. And so you can't do it. And so what happens is now you've got that group talking to your product team, talking to your engineering team, talking to your research team, and then there's a lot of chaos that's ensuing. And so when you have one single throat to choke on go to market, and this can last for a while, one single throat to choke allows the organization a lot more clarity on the mission and then a lot more detail about what is going to help each individual person in the company help the mission. But when there's like 17 missions happening, or we can't even talk about the mission because we're too busy dealing with the urgent versus the critical, then you find yourself slow. You are slow. And slow is killer. For me, slow is killer. Everything that I always try to do is to be fast, right? I always, and I still say, you have to give the ball back to the customer. Customer needs docs. We got to stay up all night and write those docs, get them back to the customer the next day, because it's so pivotal in the beginning to demonstrate how ready you are for sort of their engagements.
One of the interesting things about how you were talking about all that was that a lot of it was the feedback loop back to the company. You're out there, you're at the pinnacle, you're at the coalface, talking to prospects, and then feeding things back. Now, I think that's not a common sales role, right? The sales role is, give me my stuff, let me go and knock down some doors and try and get some customers.
Yeah.
How much of your role did you view as we have to get revenue, and how much of it was we have to get feedback?
I definitely felt the revenue pressure the most. But I think, in my opinion, the best way to get to revenue was to be really explicit and detail oriented with the rest of the organization about what was going to lead to revenue. So like by default, it led to a prioritization of features, requests, and roadmap additions based upon the likelihood of revenue. I think the key piece that I was able to help, not just internal to the company, but also into the external audiences like customers and prospects and partners, was to really like demystify some of their asks. We did try to, this was early days in a new category, and we did try to spend a lot of time scoping what exactly the ask was down to like the workflow and the feature. And I think that's another piece that is probably difficult for early salespeople to do, because it requires a lot of vulnerability on both sides of the table. So you have to say, as me, I don't understand that feature. Can we talk about it more? Like, you kind of have to keep peeling back the onion. That being said, I'm not a sales engineer. So we did early days, before I hired salespeople, we did have sales engineers and AI architects, because it was a very technical sale. And so they would help with some of that scoping. It wasn't just me. As an example, we had a technical founder that was also very instrumental. But we did have to really unwind some of these asks into very specific requests such that they was productive. And that did lead to revenue. We had to sort of jump through a lot of hoops, not just on the pure, security product side, but also on the enterprise readiness side. And that afforded us the opportunity to move pretty quickly too. That customer base at the time was characterized by very sophisticated Fortune 100 customers, highly regulated entities. So it required pretty senior engagements.
Thinking back to that time, it was kind of unique. It was right after September 22 when Gen AI kind of had his big, showcase, and things went nuts in the world ever since then. I would imagine the prospects you were talking to weren't even sure themselves exactly how to tackle all this, right? Because there was no template. They haven't done it a certain way for 5-10 years. They haven't done it at all, right? So I'm kind of interested about how you would think about that, where you're trying to learn, but you're trying to guide at the same time.
Yeah.
And then secondly, if there's another founder out there right now, and maybe they're in a much more mature segment where they're trying to innovate, do you think some of your learnings was unique to the fact that the market was brand new, or does it apply to mature segments as well?
Yeah, great question. So for your first question, absolutely, it was a journey for lots of us inside the company, but also for customers. And what I learned quickly is the questions were pretty consistent. And so in the event that we found ourselves in a situation, and because I did all the discovery calls, in the event I didn't hear some of the questions that I had been answering regularly for the rest of the day, I would ask them of myself. I would say, I'm sure one of the things you might be thinking about is what it is, really the vulnerability profile of a Hugging Face download, as an example. Because again, this was back when Hugging Face was just really becoming a thing. So those are, again, that required a lot of vulnerability and confidence in myself to just be able to say that. I don't think it's reasonable when you're building a category to go on a phone call do a presentation and a demonstration, don't hear anything from the customer and then hang up and think it went well. Like, you need a lot of engagement from them. And if you're not getting it, it's because they're not comfortable exposing what they don't understand. And so you want to create an environment where you can still be helpful to them and productive, even if it is like asking yourself. Like, I would ask myself questions and then answer them because I knew that was what was important. To your second question around, building a category, is there lessons applicable to building a new company in an existing category? I would say yes. I would say the two big things, one would be third-party attestation. So whether it's a new category, an existing category, if you're a new company and you think you can, get on a phone with somebody who's in my opinion, a senior security person, and tell them all the features and why your baby is the cutest baby, and have no context for how does that make their lives better? Like, how does that save them money? Most importantly to me is, how does it get them promoted? It's just noise. They don't hear you. They don't understand what you're talking about. They don't even know why you're talking to them. So I think third-party attestation is mission critical to any new thing. And so I think analyst relations are certainly very important. I think referenceable customers are by far the most important, but that can be difficult. I definitely think advisory groups are very important too. People are trusted in this space. A lot of us have lots of friends. Like, I like to be an advisor because I like to help companies and I like to make introductions for them. I'm not the only one. Lots of us will do that. So if I was an early stage founder, no matter what, I would be thinking, am I doing enough every day to drive third-party attestation? And then secondly, to the extent I am in front of a customer, do they leave the call or meeting understanding how my product gets them promoted, which is a sort of a demagogic sentence. But the idea there is to say, do they understand why we're better, faster, cheaper, or why we're not? Do they understand what the differentiation is? Because I was at a conference earlier this week, very noisy, I thought. And I walked around the exposition floor and I thought, I don't know that any of these folks are landing, though, if you buy this is what benefit you get. And that's what we're all looking for, right? Like, when you and I are buying something, it's for a reason. Like, it's an outcome. And so I think, again, those two concepts are super pivotal for an early stage company, regardless of sort of the maturity of the category.
When you start talking to a founder today and they come to you with hey, I need help hiring my 5 reps and to get going and things like that, how do you talk them off the ledge?
I say, why are we hiring 5 reps? Like, what are we trying to get out of them? Like, tell me what your outcome is for hiring the 5 reps. And then I try to say to them, I always couch it in, you and I want to go to the same place. We want to get to whatever the ARR number. You and I have very different approaches on getting there. So let's just talk through. You want to hire 5 reps. You want to hire a BDR. You want to jam up people's email inboxes. I don't want to do any of that. For these reasons, I want to focus on third-party attestation. I want to focus on analyst relations. I do want to spend money at Gartner. I'm not mad at Gartner. Like, they're good people. People listen to them. So that's how I started. Is we try to start with the common goal and then work the tactics down. It doesn't always work. I think there's a lot of pressure on founders from investors to run a certain playbook. I think part of what I advocate is probably somewhat controversial in terms of risk profile, because I am saying overinvest in a certain type of person. Because that is what I'm saying. I'm saying that this role, this founding, whatever you want to call this entity, is going to create your go-to-market moat and be a colleague to the CEO in such a way that you're going to be able to take your innovation that you have this amazing technical moat around and bring it into scalable or repeatable revenue. That is the go-to-market moat. And that needs somebody that A, has done it, or B, at least has an appreciation for it. If you hire reps, their motivation, and this is totally what you want their motivation to be, is quota attainment. But quota attainment, before you've identified ICP, before you've identified the message, before you've identified product market fit, before you've identified how does our product get people promoted, is not going to result in the outcome that you want. And you're going to burn your people because you're going to churn over reps. And that is crushing. That's crushing from a customer perspective. I was talking to somebody yesterday about channel strategy. And I said, I know many, many channel partners who will tell you, I am not returning a phone call from company XYZ until that rep has called me for at least 12 months without any return phone call or email, because 9 times out of 10, they're not going to be there. in 12 months, so, which is so true, right? Like if you're on the other side of the table and Abigail's calling you from company X for like 6 months, and then Abigail starts calling from company Y for like, and that's so it's really crushing to have turnover in the teams too. So that's another, I don't like to sell my idea here with this role with fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but there is a little fun to be had. And I think we've all my peers and I spent lots of time talking about turnover and how to minimize it. And in my opinion, part of having this early person to sort of set up the infrastructure is to make sure those early sales hires, the straight salespeople, 50-50 comp guys and gals, are successful so they don't turn over. Like they're a customer of the CRO too. Like they need to have, and I don't think you would ever want to hire somebody without some pipeline, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like for the founder, they probably need to get a sense of the type of partnership they want to have with, let's call it sales, go to market. So you have two different partnerships there. One is very much a go do this and go find customers and whatever, right? And then they'll have to filter through the feedback if there is any, and how much of it is the excuses and how much of it is just good raw insight, right? Versus a partnership with one person who is experienced, who is going to get the right meetings with the right people, and then be very collaborative with you afterwards about what we learned along the way. That seems like very different paths right there.
It is, and this is early days of that model. I can tell you for being like maybe the sole advocate of the model. Although I would tell you that a lot of second time or third time founders, I have a lot more, like it resonates with them very well. Like they appreciate what I'm saying and why, and I think they've seen it. So I do think more experienced folks who have maybe tried a couple of different early go-to-market models are more open to it. And I think they appreciate this concept of having a colleague that they can hold accountable for go-to-market, like they can on the product side with like their CPO or their CTO. Like it's a very complementary nature. But you're right. There's no question it's not for everybody. I agree. Like some founders don't want to relinquish sort of that role of being the intermediary in between the company and the field.
The very black and white and not very nuanced view that I've seen out there is, when you bring someone in quite senior, what they're going to want to do is build a whole go-to-market thing with processes and systems and, I don't know, apps and people and people to do stuff for them rather than anything else, right?
Yeah.
I would imagine that's one of the barriers that you can have to break down. But it also means, Abigail, the population of people who have your experience like you and also have the understanding of this whole learning and feedback loop versus just raw, let's go get some customers. That's not going to be a huge part of the population, I would imagine. I don't know. You tell me.
It's not today, but I think there's definitely candidates that can do it. I think there's definitely candidates that are way better than me on all fronts that can do it. I think the way to weed through that, because I immediately start to glaze over when you start to talk about sales process and tools. So I think the way to get through that mirage of folks would be to really identify, is the candidate more focused on customer obsession, or are they more focused on the infrastructure, the process, internal stuff? The internal stuff, those folks, I don't think that's not what we're talking about. They won't like the role. The role is too much work. It's too much rolling up your sleeve. It's too gritty for that crew. But I think there's another crew of folks that are, maybe they're biz dev people. Maybe they're not AEs turned RDs turned VPs of sales. I do think the profile is probably a little bit different. But if they are customer obsessed in their DNA and they want to build for customer outcomes, that's the person. That's what you want in the founding CRO role, in my opinion. That's a way to at least rationalize the people that you're speaking with. Because the folks that are steeped in some of that sales processes are probably not going to be good at the cross-functional execution. They're used to having marketing as somebody that they can I'm not being critical of any of my peers, but when they don't have marketing responsibilities, that's a good area to point. Or there's this is the single throat to choke for an early stage company. And it's a high pressure role. It's a lot of work, but it's very fulfilling. And, but so you do have to kind of find people that are obsessed by customers. I used to have a list of people that got promoted during my time at Hidden Layer. And that's what was the most important list to me. And so like, I think you want that kind of a mindset. Those people exist and they're definitely out there. I think we sort of have to, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today about this, because I think we kind of have to grease the skids for them a little bit to say that this is something that can be done. And they may come from very different walks of life. They're not all going to be bag carrying salespeople, I don't think.
Yeah, very different profile, right?
Yeah.
I know some people that are doing it as well. And
Yeah.
I see how they approach it. It's very much, the mindset that you have. And
Yeah.
they're not sitting there going, well, let's build out 55 fields in Salesforce, right? They're maybe even running their forecast from a spreadsheet at the start, because that's what you need. You don't need a massive system to run a few ops and a lot of feedback. Going back to Hidden Layer, when did you know it was the right time to start bringing on people to sell or work with partners or whatever it might be?
I think like when we had a couple of those big things identified, we had the ICP defined, we had the customer positioning defined, we had momentum and repeatability in the sales process, not just sort of from a discovery and sort of a customer engagement, but all the way through POC. So I think that was the sign. And I think the maturing of the market. So again, because it was a new category, I think we did need the market to mature a little bit. That happened quickly, I would say. And that was also important. So there were some internal criteria that had been achieved, as well as sort of the market being made.
What was your second hire at Hidden Layer?
Overall second hire?
Your second hire in go-to-market. When it went from Abby to Abby plus one, Abigail plus one, who was it?
A content writer.
Okay. Tell me more about that.
I was right during September. I think she joined in February, because that, like, what we needed, like, again, you want to be found by people who care about the problem. So you have to have content that helps you know how all this works. And so that was my first go-to-market hire. We had a designer before me, but then it was content, I think. And to be honest with you, it was more on the marketing side, sort of enablement of marketing and prior to salespeople.
And what was the first time you allocated a quota to someone?
Other than myself?
Yeah.
I think that would have been early 23. So it was about 12 months later.
And was that a rep or was that a CAM?
That was a rep. It was a rep.
Okay.
It was a rep. I'm trying to think if we had any sales engineers before the rep. I don't think so. I think they were, all the technical folks were sort of not on quotas. I was the only one. And then the first rep was in like a year after I joined. And they were 50-50, with the draw, like a normal thing, but it took a year to get to that point.
And then you got a background with partners. And how did you think about partners coming into the Hidden Layer model?
Yeah, I think partners are great. I think partners are great at scaling revenue. I think in a new category, they're probably a little bit of a secondary decision for the first year. Anyways, if it's an existing category, new company, I think partners are very relevant from the jump. In a new category, new company, you need to build it a little bit before the partner landscape can support you as much. We did have a channel program that we launched in early 24, and had one person sort of running the channel. But I think when early days of a company, the salespeople become really sort of hybrid sales and channel managers, because so much of their patch can be made or broken by having those strong relationships. So that was part of the profile of salespeople. We were hiring folks that did have channel relationships, not because we thought the channel was totally ready to bring us to market like it's CrowdStrike or something else, but because there's familiarity, there's trust, helps with rapport. But again, like, it's difficult. Like, partners are difficult. Like I told you, they don't want to engage with you until they know you've been there for a minute. So we were respectful of that. And that's why we didn't launch the program earlier. Like, we waited to do a good job. We used a third party to help us with the program. And we wanted to make our first impression positive. That's what I've learned from. What I've learned from partners is you really only have a couple of, like, one opportunity to sort of land the ship with them, and you don't want to waste it. You don't want to rush it and sort of have a half-assed launch. You want to have a professional launch. They're too busy. They got too many vendors. They got 4,000 folks calling them. You have to be empathetic. Just like you have to be empathetic to the customers, you have to be empathetic to partners, that they've got more going on than just listening to how cute your baby is.
Yeah, I feel like recently the whole model's flipped. It used to be that the vendors would be supported almost by some partners along the way. And these days it's actually the partners get to pick and choose who they work with.
Yeah.
They don't need.
As customer relationships. That's
Yeah, that's who they absolutely 100% care about first.
yeah.
And then, as we know in our world, vendors come and go a little bit, especially at the startup stage. And, suddenly you all in on a vendor, they get acquired and get sucked into whoever. And then your
Right.
whole, business changes as a reseller into exactly how you're going to work with the merged company. So a very different dynamic. And it's funny because I was thinking this the other day with one of my clients is that I used to have a very kind of, I don't know, black and white view, kind of like you were saying, right? Partners don't make markets. They help you scale or get
Sure.
more traction in a market. I think the one thing that might be a little bit different is maybe in the AI space, right? Because if they're asked a lot by their customers, we think we need to do something for, and who's the players, and it's a brand new area such as AI security, then maybe, that might be a slightly different view about how to work with them. But if I think you're coming into an older segment, a more mature segment, and trying to change it up, they're not in the business really of changing things up. They've got maybe renewals to protect for one, right?
Right.
Reps are sitting there going,
Yeah.
yeah,
I agree. And definitely different partners. So GSI is always going to be more tip of spear. Like, the GSIs will get asked the questions of I'm going to do an RFP no matter what, who should I be looking at? The traditional channel people, I think, are the ones that are a little bit more about just scaling in terms of like opening up the market. They're there for ease of transactions. They're there for ease of procurement, et cetera. But it's super valuable. It remains super valuable.
let's have a very different twist here now. Tell me about Fierce.
Yeah. Fierce is my mission-driven project with my co-founder, Rebecca Kahak. It stands for Females in Every Role Change Everything. And to be honest with you, Fierce is really just an organization that's focused on two things. One, networking women in technology, but just women in general. It does lean cyber because Rebecca and I have been in cyber for a while, but it's for all types of women. And then the second piece is we try to create content such that women don't have to repeat the same mistake. Like, it would break my heart if somebody had to go through the same bad negotiation approach that I've been through once. So we try to share that information amongst the organization. And the goal is really just equal representation in all fields, whether we're talking academia, political, or sort of corporate.
Was there something that happened, in cybersecurity, that's very male dominated, right?
Yeah.
Was there something that happened that along the way you said, you know what, I need to do this at some point
There's been a lot of things that have happened. Yeah, there's been a lot of things that have happened. And I was a participant in a lot of sort of female ERGs inside companies, as well as external women of the channel, great organizations. I think the turning point for me was definitely COVID. At the time, I was running the channel for the Americas at Checkpoint. It was an amazing, I had a tremendous amount of esteem for Checkpoint as well as for the people of Checkpoint. So when COVID happened, I was responsible for Canada to Brazil channel teams, about 100 people. And we were doing lots of stuff. I had them working out on Zoom. We were making pizzas on all the things. But within a couple of months, it was very clear to me that the responsibilities of handling COVID were falling on women disproportionately to men. Women had to take care of kids that were going to school. And again, this is from Canada to Brazil. So there's a lot of variance in terms of what they were responsible for. Secondly, people started to get sick. If their parents were getting sick, that was falling on women and more disproportionately than men. And then thirdly, for women, you might not appreciate this, but being Zoom ready is a thing. We don't we would still get up and get ready and go. There was no casual Zoom for women. It just wasn't a thing. So from those three sort of learnings, we created Fierce as an ERG within Checkpoint. And it was really about female empowerment and collective sort of bonding during COVID. It wasn't until 2022 when I left Checkpoint, I think it was a cyber reason, that we took it up more of a public, and now it's a legitimate nonprofit organization that does a couple of big conferences and is really, really growing, and is sort of, it's exciting to see how much momentum we've had over the last few years. It's one of those things where I feel like we should have done it 15 years ago, to be honest with you. So if you're listening and you're thinking about doing something, you should do it. But it's one of those that as much as you'll give it, it'll take. And so I balance it with everything else, but it's very fulfilling. And if people are interested, they can go to fiercenow.org and sort of check out some of that content that I mentioned.
I think one of the things that's interesting for generally the industry or the market thinking about diversity in our world, right? Is middle-aged white man seems to be a lot of the something the go-to-market side of the dominant type of person
Yeah.
out there. Hope no one's offended I say that. It seems to be what I've seen over the years.
Statistically true.
Okay, good. I'm glad about that. Uh, what's if I'm sitting there as a founder, I've got 50 people in my company, and I'm trying to grow my business. How should they be thinking about diversity and making sure they're doing the right things and helping their company? Is it, you
Right.
hear this thing, diversity drives better decisions. Is that the reality, or is that just like a nice kind of slogan that people throw out, during, Women's Awareness Month or something,
Yeah.
whatever happens every year?
Well, yeah, I mean, the data shows that. So the data will show things like, they'll show things like it's important to have representation of your customer base in your organization, things like that. But it also shows that women are a little bit more risk averse. And so they will do things like provide better organic growth and acquisition and mergers growth. So I think it can be a counterbalance to some of the more riskier decisions. Outside of cyber, in other industries, in particular in the financial industry, and I think in pharma, what you will see is there is some improved market returns if you have a more diverse C-suite and board. So those are all stats that we share within Pearson that are publicly available. I think what is so powerful about having diversity, any underrepresented group, not just women, any underrepresented group, I think in the day and age of AI, where things are becoming more automated, less personalized, you can differentiate yourselves by having more underrepresented groups in your company. And I think differentiation always is important, but it's going to become increasingly important as everything is sort of commoditized down to these bots and sort of messaging that's been written by ChatGPT, which we all know if it's been written by ChatGPT or not. So I think the diversity of voice will even become more important now than it has been. And I think, and it's not just incumbent on organizations to invest. I think women, a lot of what we do at Fierce is we tell women, please raise your hand and say you're interested. Like that's half the battle. So I don't think organizations have a conscious desire not to hire underrepresented groups. I think some of the underrepresented groups need to be a little bit more aggressive. And so that's why I've always felt very fortunate to be in a position where I can sort of share my learnings, but also support women. We spend a lot of time in Fierce kind of networking women into roles that we hear about. It's hard. It's hard to find women that are interested in some of the roles. So the more the merrier. And a lot of the reason we spent time at Fierce focused on future generations. Today, women are about 24% of the cyber industry. They think by 27 will be 30%. I don't know. I mean, it's still well under 50, but it's going in the right direction relatively. And I do think younger women are definitely more open-minded about cyber, and definitely compared to when I started 15 years ago, for sure. So I think it is good for companies. That being said, I don't think companies should just do it to do it. Like I think it has to make sense for their business.
I feel like we've come a long way since 20 years ago, 25 years ago, in all sorts of different ways, but there's probably more room to come. But it's an interesting point. I mean, it feels like there will be a swing back a little bit in the pendulum about we're going too far down the AI created, bot run, fewer real people doing real things.
Yeah.
And as it comes back, maybe that's the opportunity for some underrepresented parts of the industry to grab their unfair share, let's say, of that much more real world that we want to get back to.
I think so. I'm optimistic. I think AI is a force of good. And it'll create lots of opportunities that we haven't had before. At our conference this year, we had a great speaker, Sydney Stefani, talk about moving from AI awareness to trust and what that means for women. And I think if we can embrace that, there's lots of opportunities, both to use it more or use it less. And I think a lot of it is like, how are the prompts written? Like, what are we asking of these AI systems? And the more diverse questions you have, the better the models are going to perform. So I think it's like super exciting to think about how that could the benefit on both sides.
Well, Abigail, we're up against time here. That's really enjoyed our conversation. Any last thought for the audience that you want to share?
I think the most important thing is to remember that early stage is not a quantity game. It's a precision game. And I think if people can remember that and that kind of infuses some of their decisions, it'll help them scale really fast. And I want all of my companies that I advise to scale really fast, but I want everybody to be successful. I don't want to keep that information to myself.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.